Hey guys, I got my dad back with me today. Hashtag Ask Dad. Make sure you share this broadcast and tag some people. We're going to be talking about how the church should respond to social justice, the George Floyd issue, and some things that my dad would like to share about passing the torch to millennials. So make sure that you are with us. Share the broadcast. Put some hearts on the screen. And we're ready to get started here in about 1 or 2 minutes. We're going to give you guys some time to join us. We're excited to share what we have this evening. So my dad has got all his stuff. He did his studying, all that stuff. So he has some information that he's going to share with us. And I think that is such a timely word that he has to share. So if you saw my post, probably yesterday or 2 days ago, I was talking about there being good cops and things like that. And this is my dad, the guy that I was posting. So he has a great perspective to share, as a father, as a former police officer and pastor and all of that. So make sure that you guys tap in with us. I see some people joining us now, and we're going to get started here. Say what's up, Daddy.
Hey, what's going on? How is everybody? Good Sunday evening.
Yep, this is his second message for today. So he did one for his church already, and I'll share that on my page. But he did one for his church already, and then he's gonna do one for us. So he's doing a double message for today. So we got people shooting some likes up there. Make sure you guys share the broadcast. Dad has some really cool things that he's gonna share with us. Thank you guys for tapping in, joining us. Thanks for the hearts. Thank you. All right, so how many of you guys have been following the George Floyd situation? How many of you have been following that? You've been seeing it on the news. You've been using the hashtags. How many of you have been seeing that? Let me see some stuff on the screen here. And let's just start with that, Dad. Like, what was your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, first of all, they keep trying to label it as a peaceful protest, and I see it more in terms of being a revolution, really. Because in protest, people just complain. To be honest about it, people just complain in a protest. But in a revolution, people demand that something change, that something new happen. And the energy that I see from the millennials that's out there in the streets is one of a revolution, not just a peaceful protest, which I think is needed, because I heard some of the real old school people talk about, well, they haven't been trained, and so everybody wants this peaceful protest. People to dress up and be politically correct and protest within certain rules and boundaries. And
so are you talking about like how they protested in the 50s
right,
and 60s?
yeah, and they want us to be, in this generation is more, like I said, revolutionary minded. They're not dressing up. In fact, and I told this to my members today, they say y'all are lacking leadership, and I'm like, it's not a lack of leadership, because how do that many people show up in these places all at once? They are communicating. You just didn't get the memo.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because they're not texting 50 and 60-year-olds. They're not Instagramming you. They're not Facebooking you. They're not really relying on you anymore. They have their own networks and their own power. And now we 50-plus-year-old people are sitting at home watching all this stuff on TV. Like, how did they get out there? And I'm like, they know what they're doing. You just don't know.
Right.
So, and it's not going to be, again, a thing where people put on dress shirts and ties and walk orderly, in the street and whatever, because that's not revolutionary stuff. That's peaceful protest stuff.
Right. Hey, Lady Cassandra. Yeah.
And America was not founded on peaceful protest. It was founded on revolution. So that was my initial thoughts on that. Is that there is a revolution going on, and they don't want to call it that. They keep trying to scale it back and say, be more peaceful. Play within the rules. Stay off the streets from 8 o'clock at night till 6 in the morning. I'm like, really?
Right.
Ain't nobody paying that no attention. It's a revolution going on. We can't punch out of the revolution at 8 o'clock and then punch back in at 6 in the morning. It don't work like that. And we're going to get in the streets, and you can't stop us.
Right.
Because that's what revolutionaries do,
So what should the church be doing? Like, how much should the church be talking about this? Like, should people be in the pulpits, talking about revolutionary leadership? Should they be talking about social injustice? Like, what is the role of a pastor or leader, spiritual leader right now?
I think social justice definitely in the last 8 to 10 weeks have went to the top of the list of things that preachers should be talking about. I shared today from Esther 4:13 and 14, in which Mordecai first gave Esther a warning, and I think it's a warning to the church. Think not that thyself shall escape. You know what I mean? When the movement and the change that God is trying to do is big enough, ain't nobody gonna escape it. Because Esther was a Jew, and the people didn't know who she was,
right?
And it was time for her to make herself known, and she wasn't going to escape the situation without making herself known. And I think that is the warning to the church, that if you are a Christian, white, black, whatever, now is the time in this movement for you to make yourself known, for you to step out. And if you don't step out, you won't escape. You're not going to escape it by pretending like you don't see it, or by telling them to calm down, or you're not going to escape it. And he went on to tell her that if you hold your peace at this time, so if you be quiet and you hide out and you hope something will change without you doing anything, then he says the enlargement, the deliverance will arise to the Jews from another place. And so God is still going to do it, church, 50, 60-year-olds and upward. Y'all can act like you don't see what's going on, or you can hope that people calm down. But if you don't do it, God is still going to do it. It reminds me of when the people of Israel were wandering in the wilderness, and God intended for those original people to go in, but they walked around the same mountain for 40 years, and God got tired of it, and what he did was he killed those original people. He let them die, and he passed the promise to the next generation. So he didn't change the promise. He just changed the people. You see what I'm saying?
So God don't change the promise. He changed the people.
Right. He ain't going to change his promise. It was meant for those people to go in. But God said, if you don't go in, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to let you die off, and then I'll pass the promise to the next generation. And I see that happening right now, is the millennials are going out in the streets, and the torch is being passed. To people 40 and under, that now suddenly is their time to change the country, because the people 40 and over or 50 and over have had their chance. The baby boomers have had their chance, and they are the ones, unfortunately, that are fighting to keep everything as it was. That's trying to reopen America and hope that everything will just go back to the way that it used to be. And they haven't yet realized that it's never going to be what it used to be. And quite frankly, there's a portion of America that don't want it to be the way that it used to be. And I think those are the millennials. And I think in this moment, God has passed that torch.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just a matter of God is gonna do it, and what's gonna happen? The church, as it is going to become insignificant if it doesn't step into the time, because God has a time for everybody. God has purposed everybody for a time, and that's what I talked about, time and timing. God made you for a time, but you got to know what that time is and the timing in which it's time for you to step into that moment. And I think now is a time for the church to step into the moment, and it's not stepping into the moment. They're waiting for the building to reopen. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah, the old people are waiting for the building to reopen, and the young people know the church is in the streets.
Wow, yeah.
You know what I mean? The church is out here. The redemption, the salvation is out here in the streets. And y'all sitting over here wondering, I got members texting me want to know when can they come back in the building. And it's like, man, you in the church outside of the building, and you still haven't realized that the life of the church is not in the building. It's outside of the building.
Right.
And the young people in the streets, they know, where their salvation and their deliverance is. It's making God and them real in the streets, making their presence felt in the streets. And the church is going to be left behind, I feel, if it doesn't quickly engage, if it doesn't step in the moment. Well, if y'all get free, get liberation and salvation, why would you come back to the church if the church wasn't involved in your struggle? If the church wasn't engaged in the revolution that you are engaging, why would you want to be a part of it? Because it's a dead church if it's missing the moment, and I do feel like that, and I'm preaching that to church people, that God made the church for this moment, and we in our fear and our denial are not stepping into it. We're not stepping into it, and because we're not stepping into it, our young people are having to step into that moment without you.
Wow.
You know what I mean? They're not seeking your guidance. They didn't text you. They didn't ask your permission.
Right.
They didn't ask what you thought. They don't even trust in you really in that way. They just know it got to be done, and they out there. I
think a lot of people perceive that as millennials not following the process. Like, millennials just want to go from I'm called to do this to I'm already doing it. They sometimes they stereotype us as not being willing to follow through with processes, and it kind of sounds like we creating a new process.
Well, I mean, I don't even know if it's new. I think part of American culture again is the political correctness, even in protests. Walk in a single line and wear a tie. Sit at the lunch counter and let people pour stuff over your head, and that's but what has come out of that is not a real change. Because here we are 60 years later after that, still dealing with pervasive white supremacy in the society. And so sometimes those politically correct because what will happen, I look at them, especially minorities in America, as being like, from a police perspective, being like domestic violence victims. America keeps stepping on us. They keep beating and abusing us. And then when something happens, we complain. And then they say, oh, okay, we're going to make it right. And then just don't tear up nothing. Don't burn, don't calm down. And then they'll put a little Band-Aid on it. And then y'all will be 20 years from now, you'll be in your 50s dealing with the same stuff all over again. Every generation, unless it's really changed. Because I've seen that happen in my lifetime. Born in the 60s in King, and and I never would have thought, because of the civil rights history of the nation, that I would reach this point in my life to see the nation basically go back to where it was when I was born. You know, and so and then that's the world, unfortunately, that we have given to you all, and we haven't admitted that we haven't solved these problems, and y'all see it, and you've been seeing it, and they want you to be peaceful, but killing a man, choking a man to death with your knee in a broad daylight is not peaceful. You know what I mean? And the fact that you could do that in broad daylight is not just about that officer doing it. It's about his awareness that black male life in particular had no value to the larger society, because if there's any value there, he would not be able to brutalize a black man in public in daylight like that. So
what do you think that I'm glad that you taking it to the George Floyd thing, like what do you think, or what is the message that you have given Brandon and Dorian, my brothers, because parents are having to have these conversations with their sons about police brutality, and if you end up in a situation like this, like what kind of message have you given my brothers?
I mean, I've given all of you, I think, and just an awareness of who you are and what it means to be black in the society. Because again, I'm Generation X, as they say, that unknown, in which, coming out of those civil rights eras, those of us who grew up post-civil rights, we were Generation X. It's kind of an undefined, and black people my age, that are hitting middle age, really kind of struggle with identity, in terms of cultural identity, because we were supposed to be living in this melting pot, and black wasn't supposed to mean, we struggled, but I had a sense of that, and I just always remember people saying, man, they thought I was overly sensitive, to it. But when I look at some of the work I've done and see where things are now, I'm like, no, race is always a problem in America. And if we haven't now become aware of it, or if we have become in a state of denial to think, well, that was in the past, or civil rights, why are we, well, now we know that race is relevant. It's always been relevant. And it just took COVID to show us how really great the divide was, And so my message to you all was always to know who you are, as black, being black in America, and having some cultural identity and understanding about yourself, and not walk through this life blindly as a black person in American society and think that you are just like any other person. You should be able to do that. When America reaches the pinnacle of what it should be, it shouldn't matter, but it does matter, and so I wanted you all of you to know that, that it, the color of your skin, your culture, it matters. And it matters to white people, to be quite frank about it. It doesn't matter to you, it matters to them. And so we have to be aware of their awareness of us, basically, is what it is. Black people have to be ever aware of white people's awareness of you, because it's not you. We've never done anything in this country to deserve the way we've been treated. George Floyd didn't do anything. Obama hasn't done anything to receive the attacks that he does constantly by the president. Ahmaud Arbery didn't do anything. So we're not doing anything. What it is their fixation with you that's really irrational. That sometimes we can't understand. Why do they hate? Why do they hate us like this? why do they have such this indifference and such this fixation with blackness? You know, and we'll talk more about that too as we go through this, because I think too part of our identity in terms of Christian, the Christian aspect, and something again I talked to my people about was that you got to remember now, the garden Ethiopia. You know, when you look in your Bible, in second chapter of Genesis, Ethiopia was just downstream from the Garden of Eden. There's a river, Gihon, that circled around the whole land of Ethiopia. So what I have to sometimes remind my white colleagues is that Africa is at the heart of the creation in the Bible. The people in the Bible are black people, African people, Hebrew people. Jesus is a Hebrew. Moses, all the patriarchs. And so understand, my fellow white Christians, that the Jesus who you say you love looks in all actuality just like the people you say you hate.
Wow.
And so how crazy is that? This Jesus whom you say you love looks just like these people that you say that you hate. There is something wrong with that. There's something, and then you've made Jesus white. You see, which is the foundation of white supremacy, is that God is white, which is a fallacy. But it's very real in the minds of white people that they have adopted this idea that they look like God. And thus, because in their minds, psychologically, they look like God, that every other person is subordinate to them. And it's such a fallacy and such a sickness, because the people of the Bible are African people. You see, that doesn't make us superior people, because Jesus is still for everybody. But sometimes we got to put the Bible also into correct cultural perspective to show them the craziness of racism. For Christians, how crazy is it for you to hate Obama or George Floyd or Ahmaud Arbery? How crazy is it for you to hate them? And you say you love a Jesus who looks like them?
Wow.
How crazy is that? That's sick. It's really sick. And how sick is it for us to be in the church, white, black, or whoever, and we're using this Bible, and we won't put it in proper cultural perspective. You know, we won't say, look, and I had to preach on that Saturday and say, look, I look like the people in here. You know, so be careful saying you love Jesus and saying you hate me. You know, be careful, because it's a sickness. It's a sickness. And you got white Jesus on the walls in churches still. It's a sickness. And they believe it. And they have been taught and trained that they believe it. And it doesn't make us radical. It doesn't make us militant. To put the Bible in proper cultural perspective, because we need to take this time to dispel the myth of white supremacy. You know, and again, the foundation of white supremacy, what makes white people feel that they are supreme, is that they look like God. That is the basis of it. It was the basis of slavery. It's the basis of everything that white people have done across the globe, is that they look like God, therefore they have the power to do whatever it is they want to do. And some of us have been duped under that idea of the white Christ. And we haven't put the Bible in proper cultural perspective.
I don't think people, black or white, are ready for
Right.
these kind of
Right.
Conversations,
Right.
because when we think about Jesus, we want to make him colorless, and even though we serve a God we serve God and Jesus who is for everybody. It's not a race, pertinent thing, but I don't think people like the idea of putting a race, on Jesus, or
Right.
having conversations that identify,
Yeah.
black people as original people or people of the Bible. Like,
Yeah.
we just don't like to have those conversations
But-
because
right.
it's not a feel good conversation
No,
for everybody.
No, and it does make us uncomfortable because, well, and Dr. King said that a doctrine of black supremacy is just as bad as a doctrine of white supremacy. So we don't raise the issue of putting the Bible in proper cultural perspective to gain superiority. I am in no way saying that I'm superior because I come out of the lineage of the people of the Bible. I'm not saying, and that's again a different mindset for African people, because our thing in saying that is not to dominate other people. I'm not telling you because Christ likely looked like me that I have the right to dominate you. I wouldn't use it in that way. It's evil,
right?
To use it, but it's amazing. Again, I have churches right now that still that's still getting what's the word we want to use, bringing different people in together.
Diversity.
Integrated or diverse, and they still have in almost every room of the church you go in. There's white images of of Christ, and it's okay when Christ is white. Nobody questions the white Christ, but when you question the white Christ, someone will then say, "Why does it matter?" But if it didn't matter, why did you make him white? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So don't tell me that the cultural lineage of Jesus doesn't matter, because if it didn't matter, someone would not have had to make him white. And psychologically, again, it's done damage to white people because it's given them a false sense of superiority. And likewise, black people have been damaged because they've got a false sense of inferiority based upon the image that's been perpetrated of Jesus. And that's why it makes black people uncomfortable too. Because if you tell your white friends the proper cultural perspective of the Bible, they will not like you anymore. And so that's part of the damage of racism, is that black people are afraid to say things that are true that will upset the common belief of white supremacists. And why should we be afraid to have this conversation in truth for fear that it's going to upset the truth, is going to upset somebody, and it's just true that the people in the Bible are African people. The Hebrew people are African people. And again, there's nothing wrong with white people worshiping and having Christ as their savior. But there is a strange dichotomy in that you say you love a Jesus who looks like people who you say you hate. That's a problem that needs to be solved. That's a psychological problem that how we fix that. I don't know. But part of it is telling the truth. And start dealing in that truth.
Yeah, so you were telling me about a blueprint. You talked to me about a blueprint.
Yeah, there's, and I wish I had the stuff in front of me so I could give people the proper scriptural reference for it. And maybe we can, if they bear with me, I can. But there is a story in the Bible I'll just tell the story where King David had built. He had the blueprints for the temple, and God would not allow him to build the temple because of the blood that he had on his hands, and he had to pass it to Solomon, and so Solomon did build the temple, and God did ordain Solomon to build it. The blueprint was David's, and David gave Solomon the blueprints, and so. And that being said, again, that certain generations can only do so much work, can only make so much progress. And we have to hand over those blueprints to the next generation, because David's thing was war. You know, his thing was war. And Solomon came into a time of rest, you know, a time of building. And so I think we have some good blueprints. The Bible, again, King, everything. I feel like everything I'm preaching in the last 8 to 10 weeks have been in the spirit of King, because there's a blueprint already there, and it's a shame because we're reteaching lessons that already been taught. You know, King has already talked to us about capitalism, and he's talked to us about losing our souls, and he's talked to us about not bowing down to political power over spiritual power. You know, he's talked to us about the ills of white supremacy and racism. He's talked to us about the ills of war and the money we spend on war rather than human development. The blueprint is already there, and so I think we need to remind you all of the blueprint, give you the blueprint, and let you go on and build, because we haven't finished the work. The baby boomers and Generation Xers haven't finished the work, and I'm inspired to see what is going on, that I feel like the millennials can finish this work, you know, finish the work of King, because it's clear that the work isn't finished. Although the blueprint has been laid, per se, the prescription for the illness has been given, but America hasn't fully taken the medicine. You know what I mean? We haven't fully, because we are a disobedient people. You know, anytime people tell you to stay in the house so you don't spread a disease, and 100,000 people have died in the country, and we keep on talking about let's hurry up and reopen stuff, that's just disobedience. You know, and disobedience that's continues to take lives, you know. And so we are just, America is just a disobedient people, you know. And some of it has to do with white supremacy, because there's people who are, you know, just dedicated to, you're not going to tell me what to do. If you tell me to go left, I'm going to go right. If you say go up, I'm going to go down. And if you tell me not to jump in the water when I can't swim, that I can drown. There's some people that would argue for the right to drown.
Right.
You know what I mean? I can jump in the water if I want to. I don't have to swim. It's what I want. I don't have to know how to swim. It's what I want to do. You see? And that's just a disobedience, you know, that we have, that we still see in America. And it's incredible. It's incredible, the disobedience that we have in America.
So just in summary, you know, you're saying that we need to, you know, tear down some of these monuments of white supremacy and use the blueprint.
Yeah, I think honestly that's what revolutions would do, is just tear it all down, you know, and you don't want to, you know, advocate violence at the same time. But at the same time, when you see, and they say, why are people burning and looting and tearing this and tearing that down? Because it's like people that are involved in the mainstream, they're invested in that. But a lot of times the millennials are not. They don't mean the stuff that they're tearing up. It doesn't mean anything to them.
Mm-hmm.
It's money. And that's part of the evil of America, is that we see now that we will put capitalism profits over people. You know, we force people back to work and everything else because we're more interested in saving the economy than saving lives. And that's clear. That's a clear message that's coming from the White House and coming from corporate America, that profits are more important than people. And we'll risk you dying so that we can make a few more automobiles or whatever it is, you know, because that's one of the real true driving forces of American culture is capitalism. It's capitalism.
So that makes a lot of sense. That's a very so seemingly complex thing that we have to do, you know, as millennials. But you know, it's just like you said, you know, there's work that still needs to be done. That you know, passing that torch, you know, from you know, one generation to the next, and then millennials will be passing something on to the next generation. So the torch is designed to be passed.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. So thank you guys for joining in with us this evening. Dad dropped some jewels on us. Thank you for joining us today. And if you have any questions about anything, please feel free to comment. Feel free to inbox me, and I'll get those answers for you. We're going to let you enjoy the rest of your evening, the rest of your Sunday night. And we're just going to keep, you know, praying about, you know, our country and, you know, the treatment of Black males and Black people, the church, everybody. You know, we're going to continue to keep our nation, you know, lifted up in prayer, and, you know, pray for our spiritual leaders who are having to, you know, preach and lead people, you know, through these difficult times. Thank you guys for joining us. Salitra said that was awesome.
Oh, hi, Salitra. I don't know how to use this stuff.
Yes, he do. Yep. So we thank you guys, and we over and out. Peace out.
All right, later.